This meeting is being recorded.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for your timeliness today. We will get started in just a second.
Hey, Miss Devin, I'm on.
Hey, Michelle, how are you?
I'm great. I'm going to change my name. Just want everybody to know it's my B-Day.
Oh, happy birthday, Michelle.
Thank you.
Alrighty, I'm going to give one more minute. We'll start at 2:01 just to give everybody a chance to sign in. Alrighty, everyone, it is 2:01 and I have a lot to cover in a short period of time today. So I am going to get rolling. Today's topics are going to include all things budgets and eGMS, and we'll have a few minutes at the end for just some housekeeping updates. But my goal for you all today is to leave feeling really ready to enter your B2 seats and also hopefully other budgets into eGMS. With confidence, knowing that you are going to be either approved or quickly have that budget turned around. So the first thing we're going to do in order to get to that point is discuss our planning document feedback and pull some best practices. Each of you who submitted your planning document already should have received an email from me with either your Word document with comments or the PDF that you sent me with some takeaways in the body of the email. We're going to talk about the allowable uses, which you guys should already know since you've done your planning document already. Talk about what is required for a strong budget in eGMS, some other requirements, and then some housekeeping. So I'm going to power through. If you have a question, please put it in the chat box for me. I will address at the chat box throughout the time that we're together, but just be patient with me. And if something doesn't get addressed that you wanted to by the end, definitely pop off of mute and let me know. So just to ground us, we have this timeline. May 6th has already passed. I would like you all to have your budget submitted to eGMS by July 15th. And then for the remainder of the year, the most important deadlines are going to be turning in your budgets at the end of the month for the subsequent month on the 10th of the subsequent month. Also, the first quarter PER is due September 30th, then December 15th and December 30th are when you should be making sure that you have all of your PDG and any rollover CURSA funds spent. So now planning document. They were so strong this year, you guys. I'm so impressed. Everybody spent a lot of time and a lot of thoughtful forward thinking and meticulous budgeting and communication with your partners. The partnerships with the centers were really clear. You described excellent leaders in the early childhood field and demonstrated the benefits of that Ready Start network and center relationship. I want to share all of those rationales with everybody in the department because it's super clear how well you know the people in your community and also the great things that these centers are doing for the community. Many of your budgets, you took my suggestion and wrote them in a way that can be entered exactly as is into eGMS. You were detailed, you showed the math. So like if you said $250 per teacher per quarter equals this amount, and then that was the total. Great. And then the uses of funds were really innovative with things like family engagement, other parent education activities, ages and stages questionnaire screenings for all Beta 3 applicant children, bonuses for teachers for different class scores, including TS Gold checkpoint incentives or uses implementation in your planning or your partnership agreements, and also incentives for teachers for generally remaining in the work for the year. So many really great ideas, and a lot of you had similar ideas. So it was great to see like, oh, this is, not only is this happening in Caddo, but it's happening in Calcasieu, or, different things like that were just all really, really great. Some just quick areas of growth. A lot of us had some more than a desirable amount of dollars dedicated to curriculum materials and supplies. This is allowable, and a lot of you might have already looked through your feedback and been like, oh, Devin told me I can't spend it on this. It's not that you can't. It's that I would encourage you to see how other funding sources could supplement that expense, because Beta 3 funds are really special in that they can go directly to centers for seats. They can go directly to teachers. They can do things, these dollars can do things that other funding sources can't. So I would like it if every single network could maximize those like really special expenses or allowable uses for Beta 3 on those things before something that you could buy or you could use for any expense, like your Believe dollars or Ready Start or lead agency dollars. I know they're not as huge of a an allocation as Beta 3, but if you could at least offset some of those costs, if you haven't already, with those other funding sources, that would make your ability to pay the teachers, the centers, and other quality measures that other funding sources can't do. And then also some of our budgets were not written in a eGMS ready way, so resulting in additional time for networks who could have gotten feedback earlier. So that was something that I encourage you all to do. I know some of you were rushing to get to the deadline, and that's fine. It's totally not something that's like danger, bad, whatever. But it is just something that as a practice, anytime you're given an opportunity to write something in the way that it should go into eGMS, I would recommend you do that so that you can get one iteration of feedback rather than 2, 3, 5, etc. So moving on, some other things to note. Many questions that I've gotten over the years are like things like, how much are other networks like mine paying for these seats? How much are they paying for teachers? How much are they paying for admin costs, etc.? So I do have that captured. I didn't want to share it just out because everybody's paying some slightly different rate and it would take a lot of time. But some networks are paying a flat rate for all 3 age groups. Some networks are paying a different rate for all age groups. Either way is fine. But the networks that are paying a flat rate for every age group are incorporating some additional measures organized by the Ready Start network rather than putting the onus on the center to implement those quality measures. For example, if you're paying $10,000 to a center for a child, that other $8,000 for an infant, is being used at the Ready Start network level to pay for quality measures, rather than giving all $18,000 to the center with the expectation that the center is going to be the leader of making those purchases or doing those initiatives for quality measures. The department doesn't care which way happens, whatever's best for your network. But just know that that's kind of the rationale behind where different rates came from. And then, for example, one of those measures that a center could do is paying teachers an additional $2 to $5 per hour, which is outlined in their partnership agreement. And that $2 to $5 per hour comes from that additional $8,000 from that higher rate. And then many networks included a what the Ready Start network will do section in their partnership agreement, and one that had a what families will do section. And I thought that was brilliant. And the department only asked for what the center should do, but it's really great to establish a true partnership by showing what you are going to do for the center, what families should do for their children to be able to remain in this program or to get the most out of it. So I just thought that was a great idea. Thank you to those of you who did that. And if you are not somebody who did that, but would like to see an example, please reach out to me and I can share that with you. So now we're going to get into the eGMS budgets, but one quick thing about planning documents, I said this in my email. If anybody has any questions about the feedback that you received, then you you absolutely can email me and get to have a correspondence with me about the feedback. I am not requiring anybody at this time to resend a planning document. If I asked you a question in the body of the email, just reply in the body of the email, that's fine. But nobody needs to redo their planning document unless you want to, and that's totally up to you. As I've mentioned before, that's a tool for you to make this project work. So now we're going to dig into eGMS. So eGMS is going to look a little bit different this year. The purpose of that is to help make sure that you guys, one, have a better understanding of and picture of where the funding sources are going. So instead of being structured in a way that you are doing each budget by initiative, you're going to do each budget by funding source. I'm going to let that sink in for a second because it's going to be different. It's going to be a little confusing at first, but I have lots of screenshots for you to help make it really easy. So the first thing that you do is when you log in, for any funding source at all, you're going to want to go to LEA Central Data and click that open button. Now, forgive me if I'm going slow here, but I have had many conversations with a lot of you or a lot of your colleagues that are asking a step-by-step process. So that's why I'm going through step-by-step here. So when you're in eGMS, you're going to click this open button and you're going to see something that looks like this. You're going to see contact information, assurances, and some other tabs here. The first thing that you'll want to do is submit your contact information. You'll want to do this for all three categories: central contacts, super app contacts, and competitive program contacts. Competitive program and early childhood program is where that's connected directly to your Beta 3 seats and several of your other budgets in with early childhood. That's why I have these purple tabs highlighted. But in order to get to the contact information that's directly connected with Beta 3, you'll click contact information, competitive program contacts, and early childhood program contact. From there, you'll fill out the person who is your most likely or most frequent user of eGMS. For many of you, that's you who's on this webinar, but sometimes it's a different person. So just defer to what you've done in the past. I will consistently contact either you or the person who you put into your planning document as the people you'd like me to contact most often. Once you've gotten that signed, you're going to go into your assurances. So again, it's that top right box. It says assurances. Again, you're going to want to click through and sign all of the assurances for each of these four categories. But for Beta 3, it's assurances, competitive program assurances, then early childhood program assurances. You'll click this little checkbox here. And then at the bottom, you'll click save. And when we get back to the, you'll click return to GMS access select page. And you'll see the EC consolidated application will appear, and you can click create. So I'm going to go through that one more time. Assurances, competitive program, early childhood. Click your checkbox. At the bottom, you'll click save. Then you'll return to GMS access select, and you should see EC consolidated application under competitive grant, and you'll be able to click create.
Ms. Devin, this
Yes,
is
ma'am.
Michelle. So I don't know about other districts, but I know in Calcasieu, because eGMS is used for more than just
Early
early
childhood.
child.
Mhm.
I do not have the ability to do the insurance assurances. That has to be done by the CFO.
Right, right. So that's, you can just turnkey these assurances or these slides to that person so that they know what steps to do in order to make your budget available for you or whomever enters the budget information in. So once you do that, think this is where things are going to look a little bit different. So just hang tight with me. I'm very confident that this is actually going to position all of you to be more aware of your funding sources, to use them a little bit better than maybe we have in the past, and maximize them in a way that we haven't when they were siloed into the different funding, into the different initiatives. But please, please, please ask a lot of questions as we go through. So when you click into create, you're going to see EC consolidated app, and you're going to see this table that's not going to let you enter anything in. This is a summary table. It's just going to show up different numbers once you start entering them in. The way that we're going to enter in our budgets, in the top right corner, there's going to be a drop-down menu where it says application sections. When you click that, you'll be able to see the different budget or the different initiatives, like lead agency, like Ready Start Network, like B2 seats. And you'll click that, but it is also parsed out by funding source. So you'll click that. All of your Cursor dollars will appear on one section, your PDG dollars will appear in another, etc. So again, this screenshot shows the drop-down. These are the drop-down options. For some reason, when I click the drop-down, I can't screenshot, it disappears. So this is what you would see. This column on the left is what you'll see when you click this drop-down. So the name of the allocation that uses that funding source, you might click Cursor Quality in order to enter information for B2 seats or the ECE fund. You might click ARPA Stabilization Admin, and that would give you the opportunity to write budget descriptions for CSBAE, Ready Start Network, and Ready Start Transform. Again, you're selecting here by funding source, not as previously done by the allocation or the initiative that it's happening.
Devin,
Yes, sir.
this is Manny.
Hi, Manny.
I just got in, and the contact, just like you said, it worked, but on the assurance, the early childhood did not come up.
Because it's not yet available.
Okay, that is a good
It will not be
answer.
available until June 1st. So I was
Okay.
going to get to that, but thank you for bringing that up. None of this will be available until June 1st. So just hang tight for just a few more days. This time next week, you'll be able to do all the things that we are talking about. So one more time, I'm reiterating, this drop down is by funding source, not by initiative. So when you get to that, you'll select your funding source, and it's going to look like, instead of the way that we saw it before, where it was B2 seats CURSA, B2 seats PDG, B2 seats CCDF, now it's the initiative CURSA, the initiative CURSA, etc. So you here in the dropdown, instead of selecting the funding source like you used to, you're going to select the initiative. You're going to select ECE fund. You're going to select supply building and expansion, B2 seats for this group of people, etc. From there, you'll write the budget line for that funding source with the object code and the EIC codes and the description and the amount. So you're going to be able to see how you're spending all of your CURSA dollars in one spot. You're going to break it up by initiative, but all of your CURSA dollars will appear in one spot. In the next, or there's also a tool where you can sort by the initiative. Do caution yourself to not type in once you've sorted, because we have had in testing a few things get wonky after it's sorted. So just unsort, let it be, type it in, then you can resort when you're reviewing. And so object code and EIC code, those are still going to be the exact same as they've been in the past. I have those listed in the next slides. So let's go on to them in just a second. But you'll still need to use the same kind of drop down that you have in the past for your indirect costs. You'll still select it by the initiative and funding source. So for example, if you know you want to pull your indirect costs from PDG for B2 seats, you could make sure that down here you have B2 seats, PDG, and click go, and it'll populate your indirect costs for you. This is the exact same how indirect cost has worked in eGMS for previous years, but I did want to make sure I addressed it in case anybody had any questions. So as I mentioned before, you can view the total expenditures by each object code and each EIC code in this funding source summary, budget summary table. If you look back on here, when you click this tab, this table that we saw before will look like this, where you can see exactly how much by EIC code and object code you're spending. This will eventually populate dollar amounts. Unfortunately for testing, I couldn't populate dollar amounts, but hopefully you get the idea. And from here, you can drop down and change the funding source and initiative. Before I move on, I do have the budget. I'm going to jump ahead to the budget codes. The budget codes are still the same. I have linked this in your planning document, so you have already had access to this. I just dropped it in the chat box too, just in case you wanted access. This will also, link will be live in the slides. But the different budget code here for 100 through 800, 700 is the only one that is not an allowable use. So if you're typing 700 in, going wrong, change it. 700 is not allowable for this expense or for this funding source. The other question that I've gotten many times is whether our center payment should go in 300 or 500, because it's kind of a really similar description. It can go into either. It really depends on what your business office preference is for those direct payments. It can go in either 300 or 500, really depends on your business office. So then the EIC codes, those kind of more the subset of codes. The most common ones are these ones in bold for B2 seats. So instruction, remediation, extended, preschool, admin, school and community support, parental family involvement, instruction technology, and personnel certification. That's not to say that these other ones are not allowed, but they're just not as common or as likely to be used. So in that link I just dropped, it also has all of the descriptions of these if you want to dig in further. But that's where those are housed. So now I'm going to go back to allowable uses, but first pause and see if anybody has any questions about what I've gone over for eGMS.
I think the questions are going to come up when we start working.
I know, yeah, I had a feeling that would be the case. I'll also say that I'm going to go over these slides plus a few more in the weekly webinar after Teacher Leader Summit. So if you're digging in next week or in early June and you're like, man, I am confused or I am lost, we're going to have this information iterated several times over the next couple of weeks so that we can best support you as much as possible. I know there's going to be some bumps in the road. Please reach out to me as early and often as you would like, and I'd be more than happy to hop on the phone with you or hop on a Zoom and click through with you to make sure that we are on the same page, literally and figuratively. Okay, so allowable uses. I'm going to read through this slide and also give a nod to something that's coming down the way in a little bit for all early childhood things, but allowable uses. Remember, you guys all address this in your planning document that 70% of the B2 seats allocation must be used for seat payments. This means that other previously allowable expenses have been limited or removed. For example, trying to limit the amount that we're spending on supplies and materials. It's not necessarily not allowed, but we'd prefer that you spend that money on B2 specific things rather than stuff that other money can pay for. So allowable uses include those coaching and teacher support, stipends for teachers, enrollment activities, translation services, stipends for lead agency staff supporting eligibility determination. And then there, like I said at the beginning, there were some other really cool initiatives like incentives for class observation, success, family education activities, etc.
I don't see staffing in there.
Stipend for lead agency staff supporting eligibility determination. You can use it for salaries too. I just use the word stipend here. So now digging into eGMS budget writing. There are some like really important things to remember when you're digging into eGMS. I know some of you, like I've said a few times here, you might not be the person who's actually writing an eGMS. It might be somebody else on your staff and you're sending them either a Word document or a Google Doc that has what they should put in. Excellent budget descriptions include these bullet points here and will be very unlikely to get rejected unless, you know, you threw something else in there that was really crazy or the dollar amounts were not correct. We want to see the name of center participating, approximate number of seats that are placed there, the rate each seat is paid by age. I'm going to show some examples in just a few minutes for all of these. Other expenses are explicitly written out with the cost of each expense in the description. Never, for all budgets, not just B2 never just write materials and supplies. Throw materials and supplies in the dumpster, get as specific as possible. And costs that are able to be purchased or spent immediately should be categorized with PDG funds. So for example, stipends for internal staff, first months of care at a center, enrollment advertising purchases, all of those things can and should be used with PDG funds so that you can get them out the door really fast, and come December, you have emptied that purse and you are feeling relieved that you spent all the money that, that you had available. So I talked about these budget codes already. Now we're going to take a look at some examples. I have some from last year that were written really well. And then I have a few from the planning documents from this year. We have plenty of time left, so I am going to go through and kind of sit on some and get some questions or feedback from each. So we'll just jump right in. So for an example from Lafayette of what that really good center budget description looks like, they described contracted services. They wrote the B2 seat allocation to this name of the center, Babineau's Kitty Care, at a rate of $800 per month for 5 months for 7 seats. Registration and extracurricular fees as charged by the center and approved by the lead agency. This encompasses everything that they're going to use for that $24,400. Now, the reason why it says 5 months here is because Lafayette did a really smart thing where they broke up their funding from last year with PDG funds for the first, I think 5 months. Yeah, I think this is what was the 5 months or maybe 6 months, and then use their curse of dollars for the second half. So you might, if you're able to pay upfront for a lot of those dollars, you might have, you know, the different months in the budget description. It might be the full year that you're paying ahead of time. I don't anticipate anybody's budget office is going to allow that, but if that's, you know, if that's allowable with your fiscal office, let it do it like that, but show the months, show the amount, the approximate number of children, and the center where that's going. You can put all of your centers in one budget line, but with the descriptions, I recommend doing it in separate budget lines just because I think it's easier to edit. And when you have that teeny tiny little box and you have to click that teeny tiny little arrow, that drives me crazy. So I can only imagine that it would drive you guys crazy. I would recommend doing a different budget line for every center. So Another example from Rapides with the same initiative, they put it in budget code 14 or 500, excuse me. They wrote the tuition rate. They didn't do it by center, which is okay. We would like to see the centers included in the budget, but with what Cindy and Rapides did here, allowed for a little bit of flexibility if a center for whatever reason needs to be removed from the program, or if they're adding a bunch of centers. Either way is okay. Having more detail, of course, is always ideal for our approval rates, but it might not be what's best for you. Either one of these would be approved. Okay. So another example of something that's not child care related is salaries. This is from last year in Iberville. The way Lydia wrote this, or Lydia's team wrote it, was she described the title, the amount of time the person is working, 50% of their salary is being paid. So we're going to assume that this 15,420 is 50% of that person's salary. She gave a description of that person's role and how it directly relates to B2 seats. Another great use of funds, another great use of description in eGMS budget. This would be approved and was. Another example from St. Charles, allocating funds for increase of 16 B2 lead teacher wages at a rate of $5 per hour, 7.5 hours a day for 114 days for this time period. This is also a really great example of how to show the really specific details on what is going to be paid out for and how this dollar amount came to be. Yep, moving on. West Baton Rouge. They also have a description with that really detailed $13.35 per hour times 20 hours a week, 32 weeks for this total, a description of what this person is doing. And again, approvable, it's clear, we have the math, we know what this is going to, approvable. Kim, I see your direct message. I'm going to address that in just a few minutes. Thank you so much for that question. Another one from Webster, similar coaching incentives led by NSU for lead teachers, 21 teachers from early learning center programs, the stipend of that amount per person, per session, totaling over here. This makes it really easy because what my job is to do when I'm reviewing your budgets is to go through and double check 25 times 5 times 21 to make sure that you guys put the correct math in the amount, as well as making sure that that makes sense with the program itself. And so other teammates at the department do that same thing. It goes through multiple checkpoints, as you guys have seen. So the clearer that you write your descriptions, the better. So here's some examples from this upcoming year. And when I was talking at the beginning about eGMS ready budgets, this is what I mean. This West Baton Rouge, in this example, they parsed out by rollover PDG, by rollover CURSA, by ARPA CCDBG. They showed the dates of their drawdown. You won't need the dates of your drawdown in eGMS, but this is good information for you to know so that you are so that you're ready to make those reimbursement requests when the time comes. But Crystal wrote, stipend for early childhood staff to coordinate B2 recruit, redetermine eligibility, et cetera. So that description of what's happening and the rate of 144 hours times 40 per hour is this total here. So another great example, she put it in the budget category because that's going to a salary of a person in West Baton Rouge. She'll need that second EIC code, but that's okay. I know that she's going to be able to get it. And another example in St. Landry, June wrote about teacher step increases, paid sick days, stipends for teachers. Now this will likely need to be parsed out into different budget lines when it's in eGMS. So each bullet point gets its own line. And I would push June to say, okay, which one's going for which thing, or which funding source is contributing to which one. For example, you might need to divide 122,880 into different sections, and maybe 100,000 of that is going to be paid by PDG, and then the remaining 22,880 will be paid by ARPA. But this description level is excellent for June to be able to get these descriptions approved. It's clear, the math is shown. I know what this amount is going for. She wrote the description for each really clearly. So Rapides, another example of how detailed we want to see. And she even put the percentage of her total allocation here for the planning document. You don't need that for the budget, but that is also just really good to know. So we're coming to the end of my slides, but I do want to address Kim's question before I jump into a discussion. So Kim from Vermilion asked, what is the best way to write a budget that is specific, but will not corner a site into a situation where they have too many or not enough seats? Just throw in the word approximately. And if something drastically changes, that you are going to like really change up the number of seats by a significant number, like 5 or more, then that would require an amendment, because you're probably going to be taking away or adding another 50,000 or so if that's the case. But you add the word approximately, say, estimated. That is okay, as long as we're able to see generally how much is going to each network. And you can always do an amendment. And definitely, if and when you need to do an amendment, flag it for me. Many of you already do this and say, hey, Devin, I submitted an amendment on May 20th, and either it hasn't gotten approved or it doesn't look like anybody's looked at it yet. Hopefully, if you say, hey, Devin, I submitted this amendment, can you prioritize that? Then I absolutely can. And I will politely pester my colleagues in the grants management department to make sure that they approve the amendment as quickly as possible. But there's no limit to the number of amendments that you can make. And there's no limit to the number of reimbursements you're allowed to draw down. So, though it does take time, the more you and I communicate, the more quickly we can get things rolling. And the more likely we'll be able to respond to your kind of more day-to-day needs in the budget as possible. But for now, the words approximately and estimated will be just fine. So hopefully, Kim, that answered your question. And I don't see, I see one other question. Indirect costs, Emily from Noeen/Agenda had a question if indirect costs are allowable. Yes, they are. That percentage, Emily, is set by the, it's preset by the network and the department. I don't choose that. Rate. And so once you just like click that little drop down that I showed you earlier in the slides, then you should be able to populate your indirect costs. Manny, can you send me that in an email, and I'll be able to forward it to my grants management team? Okay. So now we have time to break out into a little bit of discussion before we close out. I would just like to hear from you guys either an answer to any of these questions. What made an excellent budget description? What preparation do you think these networks did or do currently to achieve a detailed budget description? And what next steps does your network need to take to prepare for your budget submission in eGMS? So anybody who'd like can pop off mute or share in the chat box any responses to this or any other questions that you might have. Emmy, I see your hand is raised. You can pop off mute.
Devin, the only thing comment I was going to make is a reference to when you talked about category 300 and 500 as it relates with the agreements with the child cares. One of the things I used to put them in 500, but then when one of y'all review it and pass it to the next level, and then we get a note saying then this needs to be in 300.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I made these slides the way they are, Manny, because I'm going to, sorry, I just dropped a pen. I'm going to share these, and actually many of our grants management team members are on this call right now. So the feedback that is in this email or in this slide deck, excuse me, is the foundation for any feedback that you should be receiving.
Thank
So
you.
part of the reason, you know, I've seen that conflicting feedback before. So that's part of the reason why I put the slides the way they are. Emmy, you have your hand raised. You can go ahead and pop off mute.
I just wanted to share for the person in Vermilion. This year we are paying a different amount per age group to match the CCAP rates, but we're still leaving our budget and our contracts to a max seat allocation total. So like we'll have an infant rate, a toddler rate, and a pre-K rate or a 3-year-old rate, but we still max them at 10 seats total so that we can move the seats around. So that was one thing that helped us. And then the other part, from what I'm understanding, is it goes in 300 for the if there's an actual contract or agreement with the center. So we've kept it in 300 and never had any issues there for the seat agreements. So I just wanted to share that if it helps anyone.
I'm sure it does, Emmy. Thank you so much. Any other, oh, excuse me. Any other thoughts, questions? I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Pam, yay. Okay, go ahead, Pam.
Hey, I do have a question. Can you go back to that slide where Rapides had their description? And let me ask you a question about that.
This one or the one with the purple table?
I think it was further back, the one that didn't,
Yes.
yes, right here. So if we did it like this, which I think that's how I did mine, I should have pulled it up. Could we then list provided at, and then list all the childcare center names underneath that so you could see the names? I think my question is that, and I like the word approximate, because I think my question is although I may budget 39 seats at a certain amount, or infants, I may have a demand all of a sudden for more 1-year-olds and
exactly,
and could shift, or I may have one child care center that can take where we think where our parameter is like we're going to aim at a certain number, but all of a sudden they can get some more. So can it kind of be a combination of doing this flat rate and then just putting all the names there? Okay.
Yeah, everything you're describing sounds great. I mean, the idea to add in the list of centers in addition to what we see on the screen would be a great way to you know, add clarity here. I would love that, actually. And what, you know, I do have the planning documents that kind of serve as you know, that list as well. But for the folks who don't have access to your planning documents in the grants management team, that can assist in seeing the split, or you might add across 16 centers for like as part of that line. That is, you know, definitely a great idea. Any other thoughts or questions? I have a few more slides to go over, but I do want to give everybody an opportunity to ask questions as needed. So I'm going to wait maybe 15 more seconds for any burning questions. All right, hearing none, we're going to jump back ahead to reimbursements and PERs. So these are just some way in advance reminders about both the difference between them and what their purpose is. So reimbursements in eGMS, you can submit, as I mentioned, there's an unlimited number of reimbursements you could submit. I would assume that you'd want to do slightly fewer to consolidate the amount of work that you're doing and the amount of times you're interacting with eGMS, but you can do as many as you'd like. Documentation for reimbursements is optional. The budget code, dates of the reimbursement period, and descriptions of the expenses are required, and you enter that directly into eGMS. And then, like I said, reimbursements can be submitted as frequently as needed. PERs are the ones that need more detail. So the PER, or periodic expense report, requires documentation. If it's not submitted by the deadline, subsequent reimbursements can't be processed until the PER is completed. And if no spending occurred in that quarter, a PER still must be submitted. So for example, a lot of you might not have any spending happen before September 30th. I hope that you do, but in the past, I've seen that just things don't work out that quickly. And I understand that. So September 30th, you might have a 0 balance PER. That's okay. You still have to submit with your little 0 and click save, and then you're good to go. But if you claim anything more than $0, you need you need documentation. You need to have the descriptions. You need to have all of the supporting documentation. Your business office will be a great resource for you in submitting these because they've done it before. They know what the requirements are. It's nothing different for B2 seats as what you've done for Ready Start, what you've done for the agency, what you've done for B2 in the past. It should be, you know, old hat at this point. But again, if you have questions, definitely reach out. So we're coming to the last little bits of our time together. Housekeeping, I'm going to send along with the slides and other documents after this webinar, a cover letter that is just a very plain and simple draft that I encourage you all to manipulate and change with you know, your letterhead, anything else you'd like to include. But sometimes when families apply, documentation may require extra time or other support from the Ready Start network that they wouldn't always get in, you know, another application situation. You know, we want you to be firm with your eligibility requirements and to be firm with timelines. But part of the reason why this pilot exists is so that you who are in this position in front of families can make those in the moment decisions of like, wow, Devin is doing everything she can for her child. She has everything she needs except this birth certificate, which I know she's working really hard to get. I'm going to put this cover letter on her application and say Devin has until X date to submit it and allow her to enroll her child. And I'm going to follow up with her at this date, this date, this date. Again, I want to emphasize that, you know, this is not something that needs to go on every application. In fact, it really shouldn't go on every application, but enough of us have had experiences with families that have a really dire circumstance or who have faced some additional adversity that you want to be able to support. And by virtue of this pilot, you are human to human interactions, and that gives you the benefit of being able to say, here's this exceptional circumstance that I'm going to use this extension for, and it will allow you to have really clear follow-up with that family and really clear descriptions of what's going on when monitoring comes around. Monitoring has seen this. They're also on this call. They know the directions that I've given y'all for this. If you have any additional questions, please let me know. Make this your own, amend as needed, but the things that I've already put in are things that I would recommend you to have. So the next piece of information, early childhood direct match versus most current documents. So I'm going to give a special shout out to Pam from Caddo, who helped identify a potential loophole isn't the right word, but a potential snag in the process of if you are utilizing EC Directmatch to help you verify income eligibility for families who may be under 200% federal poverty level. Eligibility determination for birth to 3 seats, CCAP, every other like LDOE state-sponsored enrollment should be based on the most current information. And for example, that's why we ask for the most recent pay statements. What you're making today at the time of the application is what we want to see. We don't know what you're making in the future. We could see what you made in the past, but the time has passed since then. You might have made more money. You might actually be making less money right now. What's happening in the present is what's most important. For EC Direct Match, that is not as up to date as what the family may be making right now. So for example, if you find a family that shows up in EC Direct Match, however, they've given you pay statements to show, you know, they're employed and their additional hours that they're working to meet that 20-hour requirement. and say they're making a ton of money, way more than what the 200% federal poverty level or even 85% state median income, you need to make your determination based on the most recent documents, which in that case would be the pay statements. So a family may sometimes appear in EC Directmatch, but if their pay statements conflict, you have to go based on the most recent documents, which are the pay statements. If you have any questions, any at all about dates, about conflicting information, please reach out to me and let me know. Just like Pam did, she did a great job and said, oh, this seems not quite right. Let me email Devin. We were able to come to a conclusion within a day or so. And now we have, figured out something that can help the entire group. So please, 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 if something doesn't seem right, reach out. We are, growing with the pilot as things come up. So definitely, I'm going to say it 100 times, please reach out. This shouldn't change anything about your eligibility determination. It should just be something for you to be aware of as you are looking at documentation. Pam, I see you raised a hand and I've said your name about 15 times in the last few minutes, so go ahead.
Do we have to run the direct match?
No, direct match is not required. It is only something that we wanted to mention as a way to hopefully decrease your workload. But as we've seen, it might increase it sometimes, or it might just be an added step. It is not required. It was just a recommended next step to try to help alleviate the document stuff. Okay, next slide, and I believe it's the second to last one. So family, and this, now I'm sending some magical love to Sorintha and the Jefferson team who gave the department some pushback and request for more information about how to help families without social security numbers. As many of you have seen, the hire account does require a social security number, which is not very friendly to families who may not have one. And we want to be as inclusive as possible to all of the communities who are in Louisiana, who have young children, who could really benefit from this pilot. So the alternative to a hire account for a family member who may not have a social security number yet is to complete the application for employment authorization, which is submitted through the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And the links are all here and all live, and you'll be able to click them when I send this out. It's just a one-pager, and it asks some questions like, their name, the date that they arrived in the United States, have they ever applied for a social security card before, some basic questions, or questions that seem basic, it probably are not basic for families who are trying to fill this out. But with your help, hopefully they'll be able to do this and create an account on USCIS, submit it through there, and then you keep a copy of this form for the application purposes. And this would be sufficient to show a family is eligible through actively seeking employment based on the criteria for this pilot for a full year. Hopefully they are able to gain employment before the end of that 12-month period. I would encourage you also, with mentioning this, to flag every single family that you have as who's actively seeking employment, who has a hire account, who has one of these, to follow up with them maybe at, however frequently is feasible for your network. I know like Jefferson is huge, and you're trying to fill close to 700 seats, even more now. Following up with 700 families may not necessarily be feasible, but hopefully all 700 are not actively seeking employment, but they might be. But anyway, I would create some internal systems to follow up with your families who are actively seeking employment, so that by the time this 12-month period ends, they are not caught off guard by needing to seek employment or needing to have employment in order to remain in the program. Yep, and that's what I'll say about that. All right, last slide, you guys. We're doing great on time, and I know that we are actually probably going to end a little bit early and be able to give you some minutes back. But our next steps are for you to complete the contact information, assurances, and get started on your budgets. Really, for the purposes of this webinar, your read to 3 seats, but you'll also be able to access your Ready Start Network, lead agency, community supply building and access expansion grants, and a few others June 1st. So like Manny said, he's like, I can't get into it because it's not available yet. We're still finishing some, crossing some T's and dotting some I's in the website itself. June 1st, you should be able to access all of those things. Many of you will be at Summit. I don't expect you to do that while you're at Summit, but if you'd like to, sure, go ahead. I would like budgets to be completed before July 15th. This is the recommended deadline that I have for you all. Funds will be live July 1st. So any budget that is approved by or before then, you could in theory start spending your money July 1st. If your budget is approved before then. I know that this doesn't take, it's not easy. It takes a minute to get all of this stuff done. You have checks and balances internally. We have checks and balances. So many different budgets are getting approved. But I'm going to push for you guys to prioritize B2 so that you can get payments out to centers, so that you can get these children enrolled, and just make that happen. I'm still waiting on a few planning documents. Most of you have communicated with me in some way, either asking for an extension or giving me that date that you think you can send it in by. I would like it by the date that you told me you could get it, but no later than June 15th if you have not yet sent it to me. Please, if you have not yet sent your planning document and you know who you are, please reach out to me within 24 hours of today to just give me an update on where you are, so that I can, help dot some I's and cross some T's on my end, because we need information in that to put into your attendance trackers, which I had a meeting with my team today about, actually right before this, about building your attendance trackers. I'll be sending those your way mid-July, hopefully sooner. I would again like them to go out July 1st so that you can take a look at them so we can meet about them. But I'm not going to overpromise. I'm trying to work on that. And I will send out directions and instructions on how to do that. For those of you who have been a part of the pilot already, it's going to look exactly the same as last year, except with added centers and site codes that you included in your planning document. And lastly, of course, if you have any questions or concerns, you'd like to discuss your planning document, you'd like to have a one-on-one conversation with me, something dramatically has changed about your circumstances for better or worse, and you'd like to talk about it, please, please, please reach out to me early and often, and we can set up some kind of meeting and check-in. And otherwise, that's all I have for you guys today. We have about 4 minutes left of our time together, so I'm happy to remain on for anybody who has a question. Mary, am I correct that centers can accept children for B2 on July 1st? Yes, they can. July 1st, children can enroll. You can really, in theory, enroll them. For those of you who currently have funds, you can start enrolling them now. But it's up to you how you want to pay for that. You can potentially back pay once you get the funding, but that 12 months of care would start when the child starts. Okay, if you do not have additional questions, please feel free to hop off. I hope you have a wonderful day and a safe Memorial Day weekend. And I will hopefully see some of you at Summit next week. And if I don't, I hope you have a really great start to your June month, and I will see you soon.
Devin, you sending us the presentation?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome, Manny.